Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped our clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. My guests are Gabriel Tucker and Emily Land. Gabe and Emily, how are you doing?
Doing well.
Well, thanks for joining me. So this is a very special episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We're doing a deep dive with two of our subject matter experts. Gabe's been with Asher for about a year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
This is going to sound bad, but it seems like it's longer than that. Like you've been here forever, that you're just in the DNA. Does it feel that way for you?
It really does. It feels like it's kind of just been like it always has been.
Yeah, I trust me, I mean that as a compliment. And Emily, you have been here now 8 months?
Sounds about right.
Now,
yes.
Does that include the part-time thing when you were mysteriously working remote and everyone was like, who is this Emily person?
No, that does not include my internship.
Okay. So when did your internship start?
That would have been March of last year. So we're coming up on a year since I started as an
Okay.
intern.
So you are close to having been at Asher as long as Gabe, but not quite there.
Close,
All
yes.
right. Okay. Well, thanks for doing this. So there is a lot going on in the world of social media, and the two of you work full-time, hands-on with our clients on Asher's social media presence. So you're getting to ride that wave and all the fun that comes with it. So let's start with one of the most popular topics, if you will, in social media that people want to learn about, and that is TikTok. So it was banned, and then it was unbanned seemingly overnight, might be banned again. A lot of turmoil there, and a lot of lingering questions about, as a social media manager, as a company, should we keep going with TikTok? Should we invest in it? Or is that going to be something we need to abandon? So what do you say about all that? What is your professional advice? And then feel free to editorialize about the state of TikTok. And Gabe, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think TikTok is still an important tool, especially if short form video is core to kind of your content mix, your content strategy. It's likely that there will continue to be some turmoil around the platform.
Yeah.
And I think that also begs a good case for diversification of your platforms and diversification of your content mix. But when you're looking at short form video and you're looking at where customers are, where people are interacting, where some of the latest and greatest like tools and kind of new features are happening, TikTok's leading a lot of that charge. And so I think it's important that if you have the bandwidth, if you are focusing on short form video, that you still try to incorporate it, but have a backup too. So that way, in the event that it goes away or there's a new, better platform for short form video that comes out, you're still poised to take advantage of that.
Okay. Emily, how about you? Same opinion, or do you have any different thoughts?
Yes, I agree. Speaking on the diversification, I think you should never put all of your eggs in one basket, of course. And also, I think TikTok is important as we see a lot of trends kind of being born on TikTok, a lot of the dances, a lot of the audio, and then seeing how that kind of, bleeds into other platforms like Instagram and Reels and things like that.
Yeah.
And just how, TikTok going away kind of also influenced the Instagram grid layout, I guess, on the profile changing. You see that being more versatile. Now video can be easier shown on that rather than just having being confined into that 1x1 square layout. So I think TikTok is very influential for a lot of different platforms as well.
Okay, so it's still worthy of attention, but you don't want it to be your one and done social media strategy. So, Gabe, when we think about alternatives, you mentioned have a backup plan. Reels is probably the best place to invest that effort. Is there anything else you would say is a good alternative if someone wants a backup plan and they have the resources to make that work?
Yeah, definitely. So Instagram Reels is obviously a big one, and kind of an extension of that is Facebook Reels as well. So even if you don't maybe have like a Facebook account, you can still port Reels into that. Another place that I think is really good is like YouTube Shorts. And that's great, especially if you have a long form video strategy as well, because now you can create viral, short form, kind of bite-sized versions of the big meal, kind of a tasting menu, if you will. And then people can come through, see the videos they want, and you can use in-platform tools that then link you to your longer form video. So you're kind of playing the human side and the algorithm side, and you have a really good ecosystem, not just, this is sort of a backup replacement. It actually functions very well on its own as well. So those are really good. I've also seen some talk about Lemonade as a new platform as well. It doesn't have the same like API support if you're using something like Sprout Social or Heyorka to schedule your content. So it's still very new in the ecosystem, but I think platforms like that are very interesting because you'll have a lot of early adopters there. And if that is the type of brand that you have, that's the type of voice or messaging you have, that can be a really effective way to show, hey, we're in the coolest, hippest, trendiest places as well. So, but if you're kind of a mainstay brand, you're just looking for kind of how do I hedge my bets? How do I make sure that I don't have all of my eggs in the same basket? I would say YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels are very easy places to go.
So tell me if this makes sense. If I'm a creator, whether that's a brand or an individual, it's almost like create the video, have YouTube be the place where you inventory those short videos, make it available as a short, make it available on TikTok, make it available as a reel. Is it true that the same content will play equally as well on all those platforms, or do you need different versions for different platforms?
I think that begs the question about cross-posting and, how much we can rely on that and expecting, the same video to perform as well on different platforms, which you can't expect. I think different audiences are on different platforms. But everyone freaked out when TikTok was going away. But I think there was a time in my life I couldn't imagine life without Vine. And then Vine went away, and then it became Musical.ly, and then it became TikTok. So, you see content creators jumping ship from platform to platform, and their audiences following them. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really good advice. So taking that a step further, what I just said for one video is pretty nominal in terms of the extra time investment. You create it, you upload it to YouTube, make it available on TikTok, make it available on Reels. But collectively over time, that takes more time. And, you've got a lot of small businesses out there that are trying to make social work. One of the things we talked about with TikTok is don't put all your eggs in one basket. But where do you draw that line in terms of putting too much emphasis on one platform, but also spreading yourself too thin by trying to be on all the platforms? How do you advise Asher's clients and others in terms of how they make the decision, what platforms are worth their time and attentions, and what maybe they can forego?
That's a really great question. I think the first place that I go, and sometimes it's a little annoying for clients, but I always answer that question with a question.
Yeah.
And the question is, how well do you know yourself? How well do you know your brand and your brand voice?
Yeah.
And that feels very deep and very pithy. But really what I'm trying to do when I ask that question is understand, how do you think about yourself as a brand? Because the way that you perceive yourself will impact the way that others perceive you. You kind of train people how to talk to you, train people how to treat your brand. And so when you're picking a platform, if you have a brand that's very information heavy, very long form, maybe it's very technical stuff, right? You're working in environmental health safety, for example, right? TikTok could be an interesting place to be, but if you're doing B2B, that might not be as an effective of a tool for you as if you were in a place like LinkedIn or a place like Facebook in a professional group, a professional community or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first step is how do you see yourself? And then the second step is, how do you want to interact with your audience? Do you want it to be very, hey, this is kind of like a billboard front for what we're doing? Hey, this is just kind of like a message board? Or is it more of deep interactions, deep engagements? You're responding back. You create a sort of lingo or a nomenclature. There's a lot of content creators right now who, as people build in or grow in their community, they get additional emojis, they get additional access to new features and tools. So just kind of thinking are those the type of things that your brand care about as well? And so it kind of almost paves the way for itself, because as you're going through it, instead of this additive thing where it's well, I need to do Facebook, and if I'm on Facebook, I might as well have Instagram, and you kind of overwhelm yourself with options. It's let's look from a subtractive perspective, right? We have tons and tons of places we can go. So let's check off the things that we don't do.
Yeah.
Well, we don't do giveaways. Totally fine. There's a couple platforms you can lose that way. So that's kind of how I approach it.
So, and I would imagine too, Emily, it's a matter of resources. This is probably pretty obvious to you, but just to make sure we talk about it, if I am working for a small business and I'm a one-person team social media manager, and maybe I have other responsibilities. A past guest on the podcast was social media and events, and the events part of that job is not incidental. So you're talking about someone who maybe has 20 to 25 hours a week for social media. That person's ability to make a commitment to multiple platforms is going to be different than someone who's hiring it out, where you have the two of you doing it for them and you're doing it full time. So resources are part of the equation, I would imagine. What do you have to put into the effort? Is that true from your experience?
Yes, definitely true from my personal experience. And I mean, also just asking yourself what exists on the platform that can help me out. Where are the trends that we can tap into at? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Instagram Reels? Are they on X? So kind of asking, like, what platform is going to help me out, make my job easier?
Yeah.
And then, of course, taking advantage of cross-posting, not expecting to have the same engagement rates across platforms, but, doing the best with what you have and what you can do.
Yeah, and tapping into tools that allow for some efficiency and allow you to do more with less, I guess you'd say.
Of course, yeah.
So, the other factor too, and Gabe, you alluded to this, I would imagine, is different content types and what's going to be right for your brand. The person I just mentioned, who is half social media, half events, works for a financial advisory firm, right? So you have a highly regulated industry where posts have to be approved by compliance, and you have a team of financial advisors who are really smart, but probably not going to be the right personality for TikTok. So that's a case where you can say, we'd love to do it, but not yet, so we're going to put our eggs in a different basket. How do you advise clients? And do you ever have a situation where you, as a social media professional, someone who does this full time, how do you advise people when you sense that a platform isn't right for them, but they want to be there because it's current, it's hip, it's what people are talking about? How does that conversation go?
Sure. Usually I ask them to kind of like show me content that they're resonating with, right?
Yeah.
And because a lot of people
and it's a bunch of Minions memes.
That's it. That's the thing, right? And that's why I want them to show it.
Yeah.
Is because
no offense to those of you who love a good Minions meme.
I love a good Minions meme, and we have brands that we work with that they like good Minions memes, and those are the right thing for them. But I think it's also important too that when people, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword when you think about social media. You think, well, think of what's engaging to you and create that, right? That works really well because, especially if you are in your audience, right, or you're a part of your audience set. But it's also really important to remember too that your audience isn't exclusively you.
Yeah.
And so just because you really enjoy something or you really enjoy using a certain platform, you have to think a little bit farther outside of that and think, well, is that really what my business is doing?
Yeah.
So I asked them to show me some content that they resonate with. I asked them to kind of really get granular with it too. We really dissect those Minion memes. Like, why do you like this? Like, what is funny? Is it the impact font?
Yeah.
Is it the way that they are conveying that message in the flow of it? Is it the colors they're using? Because sometimes when people say, I like this, what they really mean is, I like the colors in this. I like the way that this holds the idea, not necessarily, I want to literally create this meme or literally create this graphic.
Or they may just like that it's video, not realizing that video can play well on LinkedIn. It can play well everywhere. Yeah. And there's an opportunity too where a brand can kind of turn a platform on its head. I remember years and years ago, there I go sounding old again, but when UNICEF did a campaign, I guess I'll call it, on Pinterest, because Pinterest at the time, and I think this is still somewhat true, is a collection of what people want. It's their wish list, right? And UNICEF had a public face of the nonprofit whose wants were things like shoes and clean water, which was kind of a stop you in the moment experience on Pinterest, because you're looking for fashion and food, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there are people out there who have really simple needs, and if I gave some of my discretionary income to them, I could make a bigger impact. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying there may be times when a platform might not look right for your brand, but you can get creative and make a dent in the universe if you have a different way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being a brand disruptor or a disruptor on a platform is a really powerful tool. We saw Wendy's did that with Twitter, for example, right? They kind of upended that whole idea of you have to be professional in your voice to be on social media as a business, right? And not every business can do that though, right? Like I don't necessarily want Kroger yelling at me if I'm asking them, why my stuff isn't expired, or something like that. So like it doesn't work for everybody, but like to that point, right? It kind of goes back to really knowing your brand well, or working with people who can help you understand your brand better, because then you can really feel like, oh, I have the confidence as a brand, as a position to step into a space and be completely different like that, and then stick with it to see if it'll be fruitful.
Well, and it's one of the, not to make this an ad for Asher's social media team, but it's one of the benefits of outsourcing social, because it's someone who's going to be more objective. They're going to see it more like the audience sees it, and probably keep you out of trouble because they have that objectivity. By the way, I like the way that Gabe will take something. It takes me 20 words to say it, and then with while being respectful, he'll say, "Yeah, we call that a brand disruptor." You just took 3 paragraphs to say it, so thank you. But yes. Okay. So we know that there's a sweet spot somewhere between one platform and many, right? The answer is probably not just one, but probably not all of them. One of the platforms that's likely to be in the mix for many brands is Facebook, just because it's the 800-pound gorilla of social media. So one of the things that you've talked about with me and others in a very articulate way is whether organic Facebook is dead. You can still do pretty well organically on many platforms, but Facebook has made it very difficult to get much engagement without paying for the privilege. I think this is dated, but the last time I read a guess of organic reach on Facebook, it was like at best 4%, 5%. Is that still true in your experience?
Yeah, and that's on good days.
Yeah, that's the best you can hope for. Mm-hmm. So what do you say about that? Is organic Facebook dead, or is that overstated?
From experience, personally, recently, I've had a lot of success on organic Facebook with a client who is trying to tap into their local community. Mm-hmm. So they're really trying to start conversations about local events, letting people know what's going on at their business. And, you're having people share it or tag friends, hey, let's go to this together. So I think organic Facebook, where it's really shining, is in those genuine, authentic conversations.
Okay.
Where maybe you're really close to your audience, whether that is in proximity or you have a very close connection with the members of your audience. If you're a small business, that's going to be great for you. Where it gets a little trickier and you have to be more creative is going to be if you're a bigger brand that has a little bit more of an arm's length away from their audience.
Yeah. Okay. Gabe, what say you about that same question?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that it's kind of, Facebook has done a really good job of highlighting the need for a very robust social media approach. And so it's not just organic in a vacuum.
Yep.
There are other things you need to do, community events. You need to be really responsive to people around you. Having a good ad set running, that's something we talk about frequently, is like, how is the ad set impacting organic? Because even though they're not running ads against our posts, that will still have an effect on how our content performs, right? They'll still have an effect on how the platform performs. So I think it's really highlighted the need for being very specific about what you're trying to do on Facebook. And so I love what you talked about with like the local stuff, because like Facebook groups are really popular right now. And I love Facebook groups because they allow you to kind of take your main messaging off of like not necessarily off of your page, but away from just existing in the feed in a vacuum, and you can kind of pipe it into a place where people are opting in to see this. It's kind of like, think of like a newsletter, an email thread,
like
right? 800%, right? Yeah. People are coming to a specific space for a specific reason to have those conversations. Facebook knows this. That's why they're elevating groups over business pages right now on purely organic means, right?
Yep.
So I love this idea of being able to create these genuine interactions, being able to create more of like a distinct community base that you then you can run giveaways, you can run conversation topics, you can have side threads, you can have all sorts of different kinds of like longer form content that maybe you can't fit into your main feed. Yeah. But now you can have like curated groups for people to come to for specific things. A colleague of mine that I worked with in the past, he helped Rough Country. They're an off-roading brand. They make off-roading components for trucks. When the new Jeep Gladiator came out, Rough Country does not make the Jeep Gladiator. Yep. Rough Country doesn't, I don't even think, make OEM parts for the Jeep Gladiator. But what they did is they went out and they created Jeep Gladiator Owners Group on Facebook.
Yeah.
So now they are coming to a space that they know has a high affinity, that likely has a lot of crossover with their brand or their industry. And then they're owning the space in which the conversation is having. They're
Yeah.
not dominating that conversation, but they're at least present in it.
They are an advocate. They are an enabler for people who have that interest, and that's going to
Exactly.
give the brand lift. And as a recent adopter of the Jeep brand and someone who's always loved the Jeep brand, there's a lot of customization in that space. That's
Exactly.
one of the reasons it works. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it possible to be successful on Facebook through organic alone, or do you think you're probably going to have to spend some money to have success?
I think if you're on Facebook and you're only doing organic alone,
Yeah.
I think if you're in Facebook groups, you'll see some success.
Yeah.
I think if you are starting your Facebook page from the ground up,
Yeah.
you're going to have it's going to be a long drive.
Okay.
It's going to be a real long drive.
And is it, further putting you on the spot, is it 50-50 organic and paid, or is the equation a little different on either side?
Sure. I would probably.
And there's probably not a scientific answer to that. That was an unfair
Yeah.
question, but yeah.
I think it kind of, it depends on what your goals are, right,
Yep.
with the platform. But I would say, broadly speaking, just to make it, usable for a lot of people, I think that when you're developing kind of like how you're mixing your time and your budget on Facebook, I think if you're going to spend most of your time doing organic, I would spend a lot of that organic time on Instagram and then cross post into Facebook.
Okay.
And then if you have a really good ad budget, I would try and use that ad budget on that Facebook stuff. So that way it can kind of help elevate your page, elevate your organic stuff, but you're really putting, your loudest, best voice in a place where it's going to be seen a little bit more easily, and then funnel people out of those successful platforms into your Facebook.
So, and the key thing is that the two work hand in hand. I mean, the two of you, is it fair to say most of your time is spent on the organic side of social? Is that
Definitely.
So
Yes.
we've got a team that does paid social, but you're working closely with them on behalf of clients to say these two things are not a carbon copy of one another, but they need to work together.
100%. Yeah.
So speaking of that, a lot of advice that I've heard in the past is in order to have viable paid social media content, the advice that I used to hear, and I'm trying to sort out whether this is still good advice, is take your best organic posts and turn them into paid posts. Is that still true, or is that dated and bad advice?
I don't want to say that it is bad advice because it can work in isolated situations,
Yep.
of course. But I think that paid and organic often have very different end goals at what's going to happen. So organic social media is a world of starting conversations and bringing in an authentic audience and having fun with it, leaving a good taste in your followers' mouth of your brand.
It's really about relationships.
Yes.
Yeah.
Building relationships, having that authentic, down-to-earth feel.
Yep.
Where an ad is going to feel like an ad. So you're trying to drive some conversion metric, something, driving some action. You want something to happen.
Yeah.
You want them to click follow. You want to capture their email. You want them to buy something.
Yeah.
So I think they have different goals, and I think in creating that piece of content, you have to keep the end goal in mind, and that should, carry you to a different creative asset that you're going to be putting on that post.
Well, and it's not quite exactly the same, but there's an analog to the world of PR versus other forms of advertising, right? PR is things like we're going to engage at events so we can meet people and build relationships that way. We're going to earn our way into the media. And then for the stuff that doesn't fit that description, we're going to advertise, and it's going to be more transactional. So it's kind of like what we've always done is just taking new shape as social matures. What would you add to that in terms of that interplay between organic and paid?
Yeah, I think that the two, they work well together, but to Emily's point, you don't want them to be lockstep one and the same.
Yeah.
I think in a world where you have limited budget and limited time to create assets, we have a lot of clients that are kind of trying to see, everybody's trying to see, how do we get the most water out of this rock that we're squeezing. So I think if you have to do one of the two, right, you have to take organic and make it into paid, or take paid and make it into organic posts, I would always start with an organic post and use that creative as a paid ad. You're seeing a good deal of success with that right now in short form video specifically. But as far as like graphics go, it doesn't play quite as well. So I would say that, exactly to Emily's point, you're trying to have two different kinds of conversations, right? If you go to a car dealership and you really, really, really want to buy that, that really nice fancy sports car, and all they have are farm trucks.
Yeah.
You're in two different spaces, right? Two different conversations, even though they're very similar conversations. Yeah. So that's kind of how I look at it too. I would say that as a savvy brand, what's important is that you have big tentpole messaging happening in your ads, right? And then if there are things that are happening that are more timely, more effervescent, maybe that are quicker, then you can pull those into your feed for those quicker interactions, right? Because you want your ads to run a good length of time, so that way the algorithm can learn what's helping them perform. The ads can perform better for your audience, and you can rely on your organic to be a little bit more ephemeral. So if you're kind of splitting things that way, and then if you're really in a position where it's like, okay, I need ad creative, but we're running a little short here. Yep. You can surface those top performing posts because you've already seen some proven stuff. But again, it's good whenever you can to have kind of self-informed brand specific ads, but not necessarily one for one the same thing on both places.
Yeah, and know what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly.
And know that the results are going to vary based on organic versus paid. Okay. We've covered a lot of ground already, but there's one last thing I want to hear about, and that was a case study you mentioned involving a company called Bybit. Can you share a little bit of that and the ramifications for those who do social media or think about it?
Yeah, definitely. So this was probably the biggest, if not, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, hacks in cryptocurrency. And it was like a social engineering kind of thing. They found some vulnerabilities in Bybit's system. They came in, they drained a bunch of people's bank accounts with it.
So to back up for a second, who is Bybit?
So Bybit is it's a platform that people use basically to transact cryptocurrency. So they'll use it to like hold their crypto wallets. They'll use it to buy things, that kind of a thing.
Okay. All right. So go ahead.
Yeah. And so, people have a lot of like personal and financial information attached to this, right? Their bank accounts are hooked up to it. And so if someone gets in, they're not just taking your wallet, they're probably taking everything behind your wallet too.
Yeah, it's the nightmare scenario.
It is the nightmare scenario. This is like the worst possible thing that could possibly happen to anyone in the crypto space.
Yeah.
And so you'd be like, well, we're talking about social media, Gabe. We're not talking about crypto bros. Like, I don't care. It's like what I found fascinating.
There's plenty of podcasts about that.
Exactly. Yeah. So many. You can find them. Click our subscribe button first, though. What I thought was fascinating about this was not necessarily how the hack happened or anything about that. Was really how Bybit used social media specifically to have one of the fastest and most robust PR responses I have ever seen to something in this kind of a world or in this kind of like damage, right?
Yeah.
Within, I think it was like half an hour, maybe a couple hours, they were already having live streams up where they have spokespeople from the company using these social platforms that they know that their customers are on, Twitch and YouTube, to talk about, hey, this is what we're doing right now. We know this happened. This is what we know. You know everything we know. We're working our way through it. And then they also use their social media platforms like Twitter, like Instagram, to throw up those big, like, hey, everyone who wants to withdraw any of their information, they can do that right now today.
Yep.
You can do that. So now as a customer, you're getting constant contact information. And it honestly saved them a lot of duplicate conversations that they would probably have had to have with their customer services teams.
Yeah.
Because now all that information where someone's like, when can I get my money out?
Yeah.
You just go to Twitter, it's right there for you. So not only did they have an incredibly robust kind of way of capturing the entire moment and a very robust way of presenting what felt like very transparent information, they did it in a very measured and in a very professional way. It didn't feel like an info dump. It felt like someone had thought through exactly how we wanted to talk about this, and the information was laid out as the platform would best serve that to the people. So they tweaked it depending on where they were putting it to. Well,
and it's a good reminder that in a crisis communication situation, social media can be your best friend or your worst enemy.
100%.
Sometimes both. And the unfortunate truth is you have to act quickly, but you also need to get it right? Because misinformation travels just as fast as accurate
100%.
information.
Yes, and especially in that world.
Oh, for sure. And there's so much chatter out there that you definitely want to have a voice in the conversation. You mentioned something that interested me. A lot of brands would would want to keep those conversations in the dark and use one-to-one channels, but you're going to end up repeating yourself a lot and slowing down the overall bandwidth of getting the word out to your customers.
And you kind of control where your customer flow is, right? Because if someone goes in and they have one superhero customer service representative helping them, and they say, hey guys, this is the way to go about getting what you want out of it, you're going to suddenly have a channel in your company, in your system, super taxed by that. It's kind of like a bank run, right? If people find out, if I go to that bank, that branch of the bank, I can get my money out. I can't get it out of that branch. So you kind of use it to kind of spread out the load on your team as well.
Yeah, well, that's really good advice. All right, I'm going to hit you with one thing I did not prepare you for.
Oh, I'm so ready.
A little bit of a wild card. Emily, I'm going to start with you. And I will pause to make it dramatic. What's something you've worked on recently, social media, you don't have to name the client, but something that's been fun or interesting or stands out for you, an assignment, something that you think is worth talking about?
Yeah. The first thing that came to mind for me is something that we've actually been doing for Asher's social media,
all right,
which is...
Imagine that.
Yeah. Super fun. Just highlighting a lot of our internal team members on the creative team and, using Instagram Reels to really highlight company culture. And I think that, doing it in a fun, organic, low production, authentic feeling way is really fun for our viewers, but also really fun for us. And I think it's had a really great kind of domino effect of just fun company culture internally, but then also starting great conversations and, showing everyone, wow, we have so much fun at Asher, which is true.
Well, and one of the reasons I love that is, from a employee recruitment standpoint,
of course.
that, a prospective job candidate, they'll listen to the leadership of the organization, and they'll listen to HR, but the voice they really want to hear is the voice of the person whose seat they're going to be sitting in or next to. And that's a way of getting those voices out there, maybe in a more informal way, but at least you might say, hey, I could see myself there. Or maybe not, but ideally you say, those people seem like they'd be fun to work with. So that's great. That's a great example. You've had more time to think about the question I just dropped on you. So the bar goes up. What's your brilliant answer to that question? What have you been working on that's fun or interesting?
All right.
So you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but you can.
My very fun and interesting thing that I have brought today to class to talk about is we're working on short form video for one of our franchise clients. And I'm really excited about it because there's kind of a couple ways you can go in the short form video world, right? You can go with kind of like a series-based content. You can go for like one-off flash in the pan kind of things. And then you can sub-break them down from there, right? And we're getting them to shift into more series-based content. And for me, that is super exciting because kind of to Emily's point, right, you create that better narrative. You have kind of things that talk about your culture, that talk about your company, that kind of like pull things together in a more cohesive way now coming out. And it also makes ideating really fun because now it's not just, well, how do I come up with one thing to represent this product and one thing to represent? It's how do I create this beautiful kind of narrative, this kind of like hub of the wheel. And so I'm really excited to be able to start trying some new fun ideas to show off their product. We've taken some inspiration from this guy who does Roll for Sandwich. And so he literally has, he makes sandwiches based off what his dice roll is. So if you're familiar with like D&D or things like that, where they have multi-sided dice, not just six-sided die, he has like different sauces, proteins, cheese, breads, all these kinds of things for it. And so we're taking some inspiration from that just to let's have some fun. It's a franchise food-based client. So let's have a little bit of excitement and see, let's show off all of your topping options. Let's show off all of your different food items there. And show them in a way that's really fun and exciting. So I'm really stoked to be able to kind of create this broader narrative for them and work with them to really tell this story for their brand. It's going to be really fun.
Well, that's great. And it's really in line with a trend we're seeing in the food space with more customization and branded meals and branded ideas.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, that's great. Well, guys, this has been super fun. We packed a lot into a short amount of time. I really appreciate you doing it. And more than anything else, I appreciate the two of you being at Asher for the last year because I get to think less about social media and I get to continue to just be the nerdy guy who knows a little bit about LinkedIn. So thanks for that too.
Well, thank you for paying me to be a professional Facebooker.
Well, thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest and we hope you'll join us then. The Asher Marketing Podcast is a production of Asher Agency, a full-service agency for franchises and co-ops, colleges and universities, financial service companies, healthcare organizations, and government agencies. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.